Okay guys, so I've been getting quite a few emails from viewers asking me about my opinion on Shimano's DC reels, whether it be a specific reel or one reel versus the other, which one I think is the best, etc, etc. And I think it's due to the fact that Black Friday is coming up and the opportunity to save quite a chunk of change on some of these DC reels is going to be presenting itself. So what I decided to do was just make a quick Shimano DC reel buyer's guide based on my personal experience. Now before we get into this, I want to go over my opinion on the benefits of Shimano's DC reels. Now, being a bank angler with very limited access to a boat, the big benefit for me is the longer casting ability with Shimano's DC reels with reel lures. And I stress the words reel lures. Now there are some reels out there that can match or maybe even beat a Shimano DC reel in a casting contest using useless things like lead sinkers or casting plugs. But when it comes to casting reel lures that catch wind or tumble or have hooks that cause drag in real fishing conditions, it's going to be hard to beat a Shimano DC reel for long castability. And also, not only do they generally cast farther with reel lures, the consistency of casting farther is a lot better with Shimano DC reels as well. Meaning every single cast you do, the DC brakes are going to maximize the casting distance potential of that specific cast. And also I found that Shimano's DC reels are the best in the wind, and that even includes DAIWA SV reels. Now I've taken this METANIUM DC and casted a 4.5 gram jerkbait into a strong headwind and got a good fishable distance with it with zero spool overrun problems. So that's a lightweight lure that can catch wind and tumble, and I think I casted it probably a good 25 yards without issue. That's how good DC brakes are. Now of course you can turn the brakes up on any reel and cast into the wind, but your distance is not going to be there. So that's another benefit for me. Now, a benefit that might help you guys out is that if your casting stroke is not that great or your ergonomics are not that great, DC reels will aid you in cast distance. And especially those of you who are, not that great with setting up your brakes on conventional reels to control backlashes, the DC reels will do that for you better than any other reel. Okay. Okay guys, so we're going to start off with the two DC reels that are officially for sale here in the United States. Therefore, these are the reels that could potentially qualify for any kind of holiday discounts from the various online retailers. And those reels, of course, are the mighty METANIUM DC and the infamous CURADO DC. So let's talk about the infamous CURADO DC first. Now I call it infamous because Shimano uncharacteristically really overhyped this reel before they released it. And before we get to the controversy, let's just talk about the basic specs on this reel. Meaning, this has the Shimano IDC4 braking system. So it's got a total of 4 adjustments. The number 4 setting for wind and skipping or max braking. The number 3 for fluorocarbon mode or fluorocarbon line. The number 2 setting for braid or mono. And then the number 1 setting for ultimate distance in extremely calm conditions using really heavy aerodynamic lures. So the long cast mode. So if you watched my on the water impressions video of this reel, you probably could tell that I was kind of disappointed in it. And a lot of people thought that I was being overly harsh or overly critical of this reel, but I thought I was being completely fair. Let me tell you why. It all stems from this fluorocarbon mode, or number 3 on the dial. Now, in the on the water impressions video, I was using monofilament, which is an easy casting line, but the fluorocarbon mode was pretty much useless. It kept overrunning, which was a big surprise. So as more and more people got this reel, I started researching the reviews, and it turns out a lot of people were having the same issue I was, that the fluorocarbon mode seemed to be pretty worthless and didn't work. And a lot of people were thinking that the DC units were defective. So fast forward a few weeks, I went and made a video testing out the fluorocarbon mode with actual fluorocarbon line, and it worked pretty freaking awesome. I got really long casts with relatively heavy fluoro, which was 15 pound, I believe, and the spool control was excellent. So it turns out the fluorocarbon mode works extremely well with actual fluorocarbon line. Now, the point that I was trying to make was that my other DC reels, like the METANIUM, also have a fluorocarbon mode, but they work great with other line like mono or braid. So I expected that from the fluorocarbon mode of the CURADO DC. And also, in that very same video, I showed you guys that the DC unit can be submerged underwater for a short period of time and still work. In case you missed that video, I dropped the side plate in the water and left it there for 10 seconds. And then I took the side plate out of the water, put it back on the reel, and made a few casts to see if it still worked, and it worked fine. It made the DC's noise and all. So yeah, now originally I would have given this reel a 6 out of 10, but since we know that the fluorocarbon mode works with fluorocarbon line and it works really well, and that the DC unit is pretty much waterproof, and that's important for a lot of you guys who, you know, wade fish, I'm gonna give this reel an 8 out of 10. Now it doesn't score higher because it only has 4 adjustments, which, you know, for a DC snob like me, that's a minus. For regular people who just, you know, want to go out and fish, that shouldn't matter at all. And the fact this is only 250 bucks, that makes it even more of a bargain. So yeah, there we go, the Shimano CURADO DC. Buy with confidence. So next up is the mighty METANIUM DC, a reel that was officially put on sale, I believe, a couple of months ago. Now, as far as the other DC reels available, I think this may be the oldest one. It came out in 2015. But that doesn't make it any less potent. Now, this retails for $500, or technically $499. And to be honest, I was shocked that they priced it so low, because in Japan, this is actually priced more than the ANTARES, the non-DC ANTARES. So I thought it was going to be at least $550 to $600 if they ever brought it over here, but they only priced it at $499, putting it in direct competition with DAIWA STEEZ. Now this thing has the IDC5 brake system, which has a total of 15 adjustments or settings. You basically have your internal line mode that you pick from. You got your F for fluorocarbon, of course, and then you got your PE for braid, and then you got your N for nylon. So once you got your line mode picked, you have this external dial out here that gives you 5 different choices, from 1, which is the least amount of braking, all the way to 4, which is the maximum braking, and then you have your A for automatic, which pretty much does everything for you. You don't even have to think about it. A lot of people probably will use the A mode, but I personally, to get the most out of this reel, I pick between the different brake strengths. So, do I think this reel is worth 500 bucks? The answer is absolutely. Now, why does it cost so much? Well, first of all, that DC braking system, and the fact that this thing is made of magnesium. The frame and the handle side plate is made of magnesium, which is more expensive than aluminum and apparently harder to machine than aluminum as well. And of course you got your micro gears, X-ship, etc, etc. It's very refined and smooth, as to be expected. And the performance is unreal. This thing can pretty much do it all. It can long cast with the best of them. In fact, it was only beaten by the much more expensive ANTARES DC in the lipless crankbait contest. And it was barely beaten at that. And the casting range on this thing is huge, meaning I've casted as low as 4.5 grams, which is under 3/16 of an ounce, into the wind with a rod that wasn't even rated that low, with no problems. And of course, this thing will just absolutely launch heavy topwaters, frogs, etc. So this is one reel that can do it all. And it's also the lightest DC reel. And since it's the METANIUM platform, it's very low and comfortable to palm. So as far as overall ability for its intended application, which is bass fishing, I don't think any reel out there right now is going to be able to stand up to this thing. Maybe the STEEZ, maybe not. I'm trying to procure one for 2019, a STEEZ that is, and then we can see what's what. But I don't see the STEEZ outcasting this thing, but I could be wrong. So this thing gets a 10 out of 10 when it comes down to DC reels for its just overall ability. And yeah, I think it's totally worth the money, especially if you can get a 15-20% off. Then it'll definitely be a steal. The mighty METANIUM DC. Okay guys, so in the second part, we're going to talk about the current JDM DC reel offerings. And in Japan, they have way more DC options than we do here in America, which only makes sense. Now, before we get into this, just keep in mind you have to import these reels from Japan, so you're not going to get a warranty, and I doubt you'll get any kind of a holiday discount either. But you never know. I know eBay gives you coupons and whatnot. So yeah, let's get into it. Now, the first reel we're going to talk about is the Sinister Scorpion DC with its dark, shiny black Darth Vader helmet looking paint job. I think this reel looks badass. Now, this reel retails for, I guess it just depends on what shop you buy it from, but anywhere from $250 all the way to $280 before shipping. And let me tell you this is probably the biggest performance bargain in history when it comes to bait casting reels. And I don't say that lightly. This has probably 95% of the METANIUM's casting performance, but it costs almost half as much. So the reason it casts so good is because it shares the exact same braking system as the METANIUM, the Intelligent DC5, or IDC5 for short. So you got your 3 line modes inside, and then you got your 5 fine-tuning adjustments on the outside dial. Now the line mode adjustments are not as refined as the METANIUM, as you can see. But when it comes to casting distance and casting range, it is right up there with METANIUM. This thing can cast super long. In fact, it beat out the CURADO DC in the lipless crankbait test, and it was only beaten by the METANIUM and that ANTARES in that test. And it can cast lightweight lures as well. If you saw my Scorpion DC on the water tutorial video, I casted like a 1/8 ounce frog with this thing and it handled it no problem. So the reason why this thing costs almost half as much as the METANIUM, of course, it's got an aluminum frame instead of magnesium, so this makes this thing a little over half an ounce heavier than a METANIUM, and it doesn't have the micro module gears. And I don't believe it has as much bearings. Now, this thing is probably going to be your best bet if you just want one DC reel and you don't have a lot of money. And in fact, if you get this reel, you probably don't even need to upgrade to a more expensive DC reel like a METANIUM or that ANTARES. It's just that good. So yeah, there we go, the METANIUM DC. If you are on a budget and you only can afford one DC reel, this is the one for you. Okay guys, so it's time to talk about what is supposed to be the king of DC reels. That is the 2016 Shimano ANTARES DC. As you can see, this is a big Bertha right here. Look at the size of it compared to this Scorpion. Now, this reel, Shimano supposedly pulled out all the stops and spared nothing. So let's go over its specifications. Now this is the only DC reel that has an MGL spool, as you can see. And it's got the most adjustable, most advanced braking system, the 4x8 DC system. So let me let you guys take a look at this. You got your 3 line modes right there, like the others, but then you have this X mode, which is extreme distance mode, which gives you probably the longest casting ability of any low profile bait caster out there. And then once you're in the mode that you want, you got 8 different fine-tuning adjustments on the outside. Now this has the first level micro module gears, so it's got the super fine teeth that you could barely even see. And it's got the most ball bearings and all Shimano's other tech goodies. So because of all this, this thing is the most expensive reel as well, coming in at probably close to 600 bucks. So when I first got this reel and went out on the water and casted it, I was really disappointed in this reel. In fact, I was so mad that I put it back in this box and let it sit there for several months. And I did some research on it, and I took it out to do battle against the METANIUM DC in the lipless crank test, and it started to prove its worth as it won that that battle, not by a lot, maybe like a yard, but it still easily beat out all the other reels that went through the same test. Now, where does this reel fall in line as far as rating? Now I'm gonna have to give this reel, as far as fishability, probably an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. You can't knock its casting performance. Now, I will tell you that, as you can see, there's no spool tension here. It's actually on the inside. You turn this little ring that's around this screw and you can tighten the spool tension or loosen it. So once I figured out you can do that and I played with it, even though I guess Shimano doesn't want you to, you can really get some distance out of this reel. So if ultimate long distance casting is what you're looking for, then I don't think any other reel is going to beat this when it comes to, you know, those heavier aerodynamic lures. But as far as, you know, daily bass fishing, it will do the job, no problem. I just find that it's a little too bulky for my tastes. You probably see that John B bought one of these and has been using it, and he also bought the next reel we're going to talk about, and that is the upgraded version of this reel. I would say upgraded, but it's just a different variation. It's called the ANTARES DC MD, and MD stands for Monster Driver. Now basically the Monster Driver is priced about the same as the ANTARES DC. It's got a slightly darker shade to it, and it's an ANTARES DC made for fishing big baits. So what they did was they beefed up the drag and they made the spool even bigger to give it more line capacity. And they said that they tuned the DC brakes for bigger baits. Now, I personally don't see myself getting that reel, at least anytime soon, because I already have the ANTARES DC and I don't see myself throwing, you know, super huge baits. But that's going to change in the future. But I don't think I want to spend, you know, $600 on a reel for throwing big baits like that. So let's get into the last DC reel that is based off the ANTARES DC again, and that's the 2017 EXSENCE DC. Now this is an inshore saltwater reel that a lot of people say, because of the way they narrowed the spool and made it hold less line, will outcast even the ANTARES DC. Now it's made for fishing braid, so they have this special braid tune that they say gives you super long cast. Now I've not seen a video on YouTube yet that shows any kind of measured distance, but that's just what I heard. Now it's got all the other features of the ANTARES DC, but they just give it that matte black paint job. And if you knew about the previous EXSENCE DC, you knew a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but a lot of the tackle enthusiasts bought that reel for bass fishing. So there we go. Those are the DC reels that are available in Japan. Now I don't have the last two, the EXSENCE or the Monster Drive ANTARES, of course, so I can only speculate on the performance, but I've heard good things about the Monster Driver and the EXSENCE. In fact, I saw a video on YouTube where the EXSENCE DC easily outcast Shimano's DAIWA Z2020, which in my opinion is their top of the line bait casting reel. Okay guys, so in this last part of the video, we're going to talk about a class of DC reels that have probably never even crossed your mind, and that is the discontinued and used DC reels that you can find on eBay and other auction sites. And the perfect reel to start out with is the Shimano EXSENCE DC, the original EXSENCE DC. Now this reel is made for inshore and saltwater for targeting sea bass, and it's also made for using braid. Now, a lot of tackle enthusiasts imported this reel and used it for bass fishing. And let me tell you, before the current Scorpion DC came out, this was probably the best performance bargain in history. The amount of reel you got for the money was pretty damn good. Now back in the day when the exchange rate was really in our favor, you can pick up a new one of these for under 300 bucks, easy. Right now on eBay, I checked and they're going from the low 200s for used to, I believe, 350 for some people who have them new in box. Now let's talk about this reel for a second. Now as you can see, it's based on the old Shimano CHRONARCH D and Core 100 platform. It's got the aluminum frame and handle side plate, and it has a proprietary DC system that no other DC reel had, and I believe it's called the IDC Plus, which gave you 7 different adjustments or settings. If I'm not mistaken, that was more than even the more expensive METANIUM DC at the time, and only the more expensive CALAIS and CONQUEST DCs had more adjustments than this reel. And also, this reel was the only old school Shimano DC platform that they gave X ship. So let's talk about these brake settings real quick. Now, you got your special night mode setting, or SP, right there. Big bait setting, fluorocarbon setting, and then these are your braid settings with their varying levels of brake force. So when it comes to performance, this thing is a really long caster. It's super smooth, and overall I give this thing a 9.5 out of 10 because of the low cost. Now it doesn't get a 10 because this thing was a little on the heavy side, weighing in at 8.5 ounces because of all the aluminum. But yeah, this is a definite consideration if you're wanting a first DC reel and you're kind of on a budget. You can pick these up for pretty cheap on eBay, and in fact I'm going to do a special review video just for this reel in the future. Okay, so let's talk about a reel that I have that I can't find right now. It's the original King, the CALAIS DC, or the original ANTARES DC. Now this reel, as far as performance goes, it probably is still in the top percentage of reels in casting. Now it doesn't have the new Shimano technology, but as far as attention to detail, this probably has all the other DC reels beat. The components for this reel, look at the spool tension, the star drag, the handle itself, and the overall design of this reel. Shimano spared no expense, and by today's standards it's really smooth. Now performance wise, it's going to get a 10 out of 10, but overall I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 because with all that metal comes weight, and it weighed in at almost 10 ounces. And in fact, I don't even know why I included it, because I went on eBay and I couldn't even find one CALAIS DC used for sale. So let's talk about the only round DC reels. Actually, there are two: the CONQUEST DC and the Cardiff DC. Now let's talk about the Cardiff DC first. Now this was a super specialized finesse baitcaster used for targeting trout, and when it was available it was super expensive, and I couldn't even find any of them for sale anywhere, and that probably makes it the rarest reel in the world. So I really couldn't tell you about the performance, but the videos I saw, for its intended purpose, it performed very well. Now let's talk about the CONQUEST DC round reels. There are actually two generations. The original, that was the very first DC reel ever, and you can tell an original because it was silver with the gold accents, and then they updated it to the second generation CONQUEST DC, and you can tell it's the second generation because it's all silver with no gold accents. And I believe the second generation Conquest DC had way more brake adjustments. You had an internal setting with the adjustments for fine tuning on the outside. Now, I've never fished or even seen one of these reels in real life, but from the reports I read, they are probably the best crankbait reels out there. They cast super long, they're super smooth and super powerful. And right now on eBay, they're going from $200 all the way to a brand new one for $650. So it's a top of the line reel. Now that brings us to the original METANIUM DC. And that is also based on the old CHRONARCH D and Core 100 platform, just like the EXSENCE. But it was made out of magnesium, so it was probably the lightest DC reel ever, running neck and neck with the current METANIUM DC. Now it had the original IDC4 braking system that only gave it 4 brake settings, and from the reports I read, it cast very well, but the limited brake system was a turn off for me, the limited settings. Now I also heard that when cranking heavy resistance lures that it was kind of rough on the retrieve. I've read that. And right now they're going anywhere from $170 to $400. In fact, John B ordered one, and before he blew up and became a big YouTube star, and he did an unboxing review video on the original METANIUM DC. I encourage you to go check that out. Okay, so last but not least is the original Scorpion DC. And I'm seeing them as cheap as $100 on eBay right now. And this is based on the CURADO E and CITICA E platform. Now this reel had mixed reviews. Now the big negative about this reel was that it has no DC whine or DC sound. And it also only had 3 settings. And it had mixed performance reviews. Now I've never even seen one, so I'm just basing this off credible reviews in my opinion, and videos I've seen on YouTube. Now in some videos this thing is a really long caster, and then there's some reports where it's subpar casting. And I think that may be due to people adjusting that spool tension on this thing to adjust for the lure instead of, adjusting it to just minimize side-to-side play like Shimano recommends. But this was definitely a beginner's DC because it only had 3 settings, and it was probably the most affordable, or the first affordable DC reel in history. So there we go, guys. My review on the Shimano DC reels, and hopefully this will help you out this holiday season when you guys celebrate that pagan holiday that you shouldn't be celebrating, and make a decision on one of these reels. Okay guys, thanks a lot.